Hi, everyone. This is Sarah and Christy with our Catholic Leadership Network podcast. We are helping ministry leaders succeed from the beginning. We're here. We talk about all the stuff that no one told you about ministry leadership. So today on our podcast, we're going to be talking about how and where to find the answers to RCIA questions. Thank you for joining the conversation. And I'm here with my co-host and colleague, Christy Cabaniss, and she is my guru on RCIA. Because you know what, folks, I've never needed to know anything about RCIA. I have not. I'm a cradle Catholic, so I didn't go through RCIA. I've attended each Easter Vigil and yay, new Catholics. But that's about all I really know about RCIA. So whenever I ask questions, it's always to Christy, and she's always excited to give me an answer. And sometimes we have to time it because, you know, we have so little time. And so today I am timing us, Christy. We don't have 3 hours to talk about RCIA. But you are my guru for RCIA, and you went through RCIA. Is that correct?
That is correct. So yeah, thanks, Sarah. Thanks for all the accolades there too. So that's how I started. Well, it's a long story, but the short version is this: baptized Catholic, not really catechized. I was taught about faith and with a small f, and God with a big G, obviously, and but in and out of the Catholic Church kind of my whole entire growing up. And so there came a point, there's a whole story around that, where I came back to the church and I went through the RCIA process. Now, let me just say this: love my home parish, love all the work that they did for me, love the welcoming attitude that I had at the time. As a baptized Catholic, I may or may not have been properly put through an RCIA process there because it's actually that complicated. So maybe we could even start there, Sarah, to make sure that everybody's clear. The RCIA stands for the Rites of Christian Initiation of Adults. This means we're talking about, you guys know, the sacraments of initiation, baptism, confirmation, and the Eucharist. This is a process by which an unbaptized person comes into the Catholic Church. What the church realized probably around the Second Vatican Council, prior to that, what you had was a person that would say, I want to be Catholic. They would go, you could check with your grandmas and grandpas or great grandmas and grandpas. They would go meet with the priest with one-on-one meetings, and then that person would be initiated into the church. And I think that the rites there were various and sundry across the world. And what the church decided, part of Vatican II actually, which is a little bit shocking to some folks, is that we were reaching way back into our ancient history and saying, who are we and how do we want to move forward? And so they reestablished rites that were part of the church from way back at the earliest times. So that's where they actually came from to get it started, Sarah.
Interesting. So this isn't something new. It isn't something that, if I look in my RCIA book, is copywritten 1988. So it's not really.
So that text that you just held up is, you want to hold it up for everybody so they could see
it. So this is the RCIA, a Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults. I have the study edition. So
that's actually that's the correct version that you want. So that, guys, what Sarah has in her hands is, and I remember being thrown off by that study edition business, was that it's actually the one that you want, because what it contains herein is what the Second Vatican Council established were the sort of like the procedural aspects of things, and then the rites were printed, and then we put those two together, and that's how we got the 1987 edition. That's why there's such a lead time in between there. Like, you guys were probably thinking Vatican Council II was over around like 1967. How did it take to 1987 to get this put together? It was because, number one, the church is slow and we need to make sure that every word is correct, but it was bringing these two things together in their entirety. So first, being fully aware that this process is for the unbaptized. There are accommodations and adaptations that can happen for baptized Christians of another faith with a baptism that the Catholic Church accepts. You actually have to check with your local bishop or your diocesan offices, because I just found this out the other day. Individual bishops can approve or disapprove. Generally the U.S. bishops have a whole list that they have agreed upon, but your local bishop can actually say, yes, that's acceptable, or no, it isn't. ultimately. So there's probably people in your chain of command that will help you with what's accepted as baptism. And also baptized Catholics, depending on what's happened with them in their catechesis, some of these rites can apply to them as well for what would be the baptized Christian uncatechized. Does that make sense so far, Sarah?
Yeah, so far it does. So,
Okay.
so somebody who was baptized in their backyard, or an emergency baptism, I mean, there are lots of ways that people are, consider themselves baptized, right? Like, my niece was originally baptized in the bathtub because we didn't know if my sister was going to have her baptized or not. So, my parents took it into their hands and said, we claim you for Christ, Now, if my niece would have gone through Catholic education and formation, how would we have proven that, what would be the case there?
Yeah, so that's interesting. This is a little bit of a side thread, but we'll get to it really quickly.
Okay.
When you're baptized, if it's accepted in the formulary rite with the intention to baptize, that's accepted as baptism. What will then happen is the priest will do what's called a conditional baptism after the fact. So even whenever I have babies that come in to the church, part of my forms with the parish says, was this child baptized at home, in a hospital? Because there's sometimes too, whenever babies are born and you don't know what's going to happen. And then there are other times when grandparents are very nervous about, the sanctity and safety of their grandchild's soul. And so they take this upon themselves. And so there's other than what they do is they do it like on the condition that this didn't actually happen. And that's one of the things I just also had a discussion this past week with my new parochial vicar was about sacramental certainty. And there's a whole lot of things that we do as church because we want to be certain that a sacrament was actually celebrated. So if one of your folks falls into one of these categories, then generally that's a conversation that you're having with the higher ups about what's valid, what's not valid, what's accepted. And then there is something called a conditional baptism that you can do for a person that may or may not be. But the thing is, and this is where Sarah knows this, like I get so funny about sacraments. It is very serious to think about how the sacramental life, if we take it very seriously, we should be taking it very seriously because it does affect our whole spiritual lives. And so we should behave as if these are real things that are actually happening, that are creating a change in us, in our relationship to God and our relationship to the community. So anyway, so that gets you started. To give you all a quick run through.
Before you move on, Christy, I just want to, sure. There's one phrase in there that I think is important that you said, and you said sacramental certainty. And I really like that because, if somebody walks into my office and isn't sure, we want to find ways to make sure, right? We want to find ways to make sure that, okay, they did receive their first communion at a church, so we need to do some research and some sleuthing for some folks,
Absolutely.
If they're uncertain about some of the sacraments that they may have received, what is some of that sleuthing?
Generally, it's calling around to the different parishes, because the other thing that I think people miss along the way is wherever your baptism has occurred, that's where all of your sacraments are supposed to be recorded. Now, we do have things like confirmation registers and the like, and marriage registers that you'll find other information, but it is the responsibility I'll give myself as an example because it's easy that way. I was baptized at St. Joan of Arc Parish, but I received my confirmation at Blessed Sacrament Parish. When Blessed Sacrament celebrated my confirmation with me, they knew because they took administrative paperwork on me at the beginning. Where were you baptized? Usually you have to provide a recent baptismal certificate because the notations are on the back. Follow with me, friends, because I'm going to circle back around to this and get there. I got them a new baptismal certificate that said I was not confirmed, because only people who have not been confirmed can be confirmed. Only baptized, not confirmed people can be confirmed, right? That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So then once I'm confirmed, then Blessed Sacrament has a responsibility to send notice to St. Joan of Arc to say, Christy Cabaniss has been confirmed at this parish on this date by this minister. And then what St. Joan of Arc does is they go in my baptismal register and they write down under my name where my baptism record is. They write down all the information about my confirmation. They do that for your marriage. They do that if you get an annulment. They do that, for they don't do it for First Communion. And sad to tell people that First Communions are a funny thing that we've made a much bigger deal out of than maybe we need to. But it's the sacraments of initiation. If a person gets ordained, a deacon or a priest, that gets marked in their baptismal record as well. So really, I mean, the question is, and it is the location. I just had this question because I work at partner parishes. The parishioners are there. The folks are parishioners at the one parish, but they're having the baby baptized at the other. And the secretary just asked me that, what does the baptismal certificate say and what register does it go in? And I said, goes in at the location where that baptism occurred.
Oh, so even if things are two or three churches are pulled together in a pastorate or a cluster.
Right.
Okay, interesting.
So you have St. Mary's and St. John's, but you're like a member of St. Mary's, but you get baptized at St. John. All of that record is in St. John, which is part of the sleuthing thing too, I think. With certain areas, mine is one of them. Pittsburgh is a diocese right beside me. They have moved parishes into groupings. Now they have been smart, and Baltimore has done the same thing. A lot of dioceses are moving to scanning in the records and having them with an archive so that it's a one call and it can get searched pretty quickly. But that's if I have found, Sarah, in the past, there is someone on staff, secretary, other person on the staff that loves to do this kind of work. You get that person and you say, hey, I got a secret. It's exactly that. It's like a mystery to solve. So
yeah, Christy, that you mentioned that we're starting, parishes or dioceses are starting to digitize this. I do know if you are working with anybody for the art who's in the military and does a lot of moving around, the Archdiocese for the Military Services USA has that information on their diocesan level. Now their diocese spans the entire globe because we have military bases all over the world, but they have all of the documents there as opposed to having to call the chaplain in Germany or wherever. You can call or connect with the Archdiocese for the Military Services for that information. So if anybody out there is listening, you want to get married, you are looking for additional sacraments, or you need your baptismal certificate, go to their website, and there's a form that you can fill out there for any military personnel who you need some documentation for. It does take a little time. All of this takes time. So, 2 weeks before your baptism or 2 weeks before Easter Vigil, you don't want to be just asking for, certain forms and documentations.
No, actually. So I'll say this to anybody that is working with RCIA and teams and is actually responsible for that process. You want to be having the interview with your folks. I guess I want to use the word candidates, but I feel like that starts to get really confusing really quickly. But the folks that are interested in coming into the church, you want to have an interview with them soon on, because the other thing that happens in RCIA is marriage issues. And, when you're not Catholic or you've not been raised Catholic and you're not around this stuff, marriage isn't a sacrament to most other Christian denominations. And it isn't a sacrament to anybody that isn't a Christian at all. So it's serious business, and sometimes it's complicated, and you don't want a person you don't even want to be worrying about this around the right of election and start suddenly say, oh golly, this person has a divorce in the past that we didn't realize, and we got to get that figured out. So making sure that you're having these conversations with these folks early on, and I would say even before they enter the stage of the catechumenate, which is so that we know, so that we're clear. When you look at this, I'm going to hold up this text because I have the same one as Sarah does, the white copy of the Rite of Christian Initiation of Adult Study Edition. This white one is, I think, a newer printing. There's also a burgundy copy. I don't think that the text is different. I just think the page numbers are a little bit different. But in mine on page 14, there's an actual outline for the RCIA of the particular stages. And this is when a person has shown signs that they meet particular thresholds of readiness, then they move from one stage to the next. And I'll just really quickly go through them. They are a period of evangelization and the pre-catechumenate, which is also known as inquiry. There is the first step. So the period of inquiry is indefinite. A person could be I have a guy right now who's likely going to enter the church at the Easter Vigil. I'm going to say this guy has solidly been in inquiry for 10 years because he's engaged with Catholics, been around them. He's had friends and family, people that have been urging them. He's been sort of like, in, back, out. Sherry Waddell kind of does this with folks, like when she's talking about like their curiosity level when they're first coming at faith, like they're poking at it from a bunch of different angles and slowly coming at it. So that's indefinite. The next step is the acceptance into the order of catechumens. That's where you would have a rite of welcome. And the thing is, guys, folks talk about how Catholics don't have, testimony and all of that stuff in our churches. This is that. So the reason why we have the rites, and they are supposed to be celebrated in public as part of weekend liturgies with the community, is so that the community can see that by their word and witness and prayer and action, that these folks have found Christ and are desirous to come into the church. So it's important for the whole community. That's one of the reasons why we do the rites in public. Then there is the period of catechumenate, which should be at least a year long. It can be longer than that. It's like when my daughter went to culinary school, the baking professor said it takes as long as it takes. That's absolutely the case here, friends. So I don't know what temperature that your oven runs at. I don't know how quickly, what kind of a pan that you're using. I don't know how quickly this cake is going to rise. So it takes as long as it takes. From there is the rite of election. Most dioceses, I think all in the United States, as a matter of fact, do this usually the first Sunday of Lent, because then you're now in the crunch period. So this is the point where whenever a person is really, really ready and they're really, really certain and they've really, really made the signs of like, I'm converting to the church and to Christ, and I understand what that means. I'm willing to be taught. The magisterium does have authority. I believe in that, all those sorts of things. Then you do this rite of election. This is where your parish would send these folks. They go present themselves to the bishop. The bishop acknowledges that they're on a journey. The bishop questions their sponsors about their readiness and their willingness to pray and participate in the life and work of the church, to which hopefully they all say yes. It's in the script, they're supposed to. And then during Lent, they enter a period that's called purification and enlightenment. By the way, whenever I'm saying these times, that's the usual. They can be done outside of this, but purification and enlightenment, because the whole community is working toward their purification and enlightenment. And these folks, in a very special way, the unbaptized then celebrate the scrutinies, which are on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Sundays of Lent. These are prayers of exorcism and special prayers over them to purify them in order to prepare them for the Easter sacraments. Because they're not baptized, again, being very aware of what our sacramental lives are and what that does for our souls. It is important to celebrate these. Some bishops can dispense of one. During the pandemic, we were dispensed of most, but there are ways to celebrate these, and they are beautiful if you take a minute and look through them. They do require the year A readings because they're specifically noting the man born blind, the woman at the well, and the raising of Lazarus, all which are very specific, miraculous moments of Jesus's ministry, and also points where if you were coming into the church, I feel like I wanted to say this really quickly, Sarah. When these folks are coming into the church, this is the first time for them. So realizing what the gravity of that is for them in their spiritual lives, don't neglect them and this moment for them to be able to engage in. That's what I'm going to just say there. So this is what we do during purification and enlightenment. And then we move into the Easter Vigil, where they celebrate the sacraments of initiation. And then Sarah knows this line I'm about to say, mystagogy is a thing, you guys. There's a period after that that's called mystagogy, where it's a beautiful time to reflect on what just happened and how am I now living this sacramental life in the church now that I've received the sacrament. So that's time for them to unpack and say, look at this amazingness I've been wanting and I've been curious. Now I've entered into. And so what is that? What's happening in my life now? So it's awesome. Super awesome.
Yeah. You just went through like all of my questions. So this is RCIA 101 in 20 minutes, like, excuse me, that was really in-depth and helpful, although I know it can go much more in-depth than that. It's RCIA really is tricky. And there are different ways that parishes do some of this. On our parish, we meet every week with those who will be received into the church at Easter Vigil. But I also hear tell, and not that I have experienced this, but I also hear tell that there is there's a way that you can do ongoing on RCIA, or people can come in to the RCIA process at any point. Is that really the that first part of inquiry? They can come in at any time, or is that like, how does that work? If there's a year-round RCIA kind of thing, how does that work?
So that's a really great question, Sarah. And I even myself, I'm gonna full disclosure, folks, I struggle with this too. Mostly because number one, I don't know, because this process, the way that it's written up, Sarah said 1987, is still kind of new for us in the church. And so what I see is a lot of our clergy are they were not well informed about it. Like maybe it didn't even exist while they were in seminary, or it was just coming out while they were in seminary, so they didn't get a lot of formation. And even some guys that just graduated or newly ordained hardly had any time with it at all. So, it is complicated. I would say this. Inquiry is whenever, and even entering into the catechumenate is whenever. So you don't have, a lot of places do a rite of welcome like around the first Sunday of Advent, but if you do the math on that, that means I entered into the catechumenate on the first Sunday of Advent, which is usually roughly around the end of November, early December-ish. And then they're doing the rite of election at the first Sunday of Lent. So they've had 6 weeks of formation in the catechumenate, when I just told you that it's supposed to be at least a year long. It says that in multiple places here. So you follow, like, I think that what the idea is, and I know a young priest that might be just down the road from you, Sarah, where you live, that is doing a model that's helpful. Instead of this being classes, and I'll say in a second what about classes, how I feel about that, but instead of it being classes, looking at it as gatherings and sessions about different concepts, and what the individuals that present need is going to be different from time to time. Now, I have seen, especially my experience in Baltimore, there were parishes where there was a really high Hispanic population, and they had lots of people coming into the church at one time or another. What I saw actually most of the time, though, was that those folks were baptized. So what needs to happen for baptized and what needs to happen for unbaptized is two different things. So you want to have those, if you've got huge groups, put them separate. And that's where I'm going to go back to the classes. Your RCIA should not be Catholicism 101. And this is why. Especially us, the church in the United States. We are seeing, because of immigration and, all of the different cultures really kind of being more present with their different religions, more of various non-Christian denominations coming into the Catholic Church. That is true. So take that as a particular group of people. Neither they nor people who are raised in or around any kind of other Christian faith besides Catholicism understand Catholicism the way that a cradle Catholic does. So what I've heard in the past is, oh, this can be for people that feel like they don't know their faith very well and can come in and take this class that we have, or be in this session, even using contemporary lingo, and be part of that group. Probably not. And the reason why is because I'll give you a perfect example: Scripture. The way that Protestants understand Scripture and the way that Catholics understand Scripture, how that is shared, how it's taught, all of those sorts of things are very different. And you don't want to alienate folks in the process. If you have a high Catholic population in a space where you've got folks that are looking to convert, the conversation should be fluid and happening, and the question should be allowed to be prompted and present for those who are seeking entry into the church, because the formation is for them. The other thing I want to say is RCIA is not a class. If you look at number 75 in your RCIA book there, Sarah, it runs down through what needs to be happening in the life of an individual during the catechumenate period. And guess what, guys? It's an extended period because, yes, there is suitable catechesis that's necessary. But number 2 says they become familiar with the Christian way of life and are helped by the example and support of sponsors, godparents, and the entire Christian community. That means that they can engage and be involved in ministries where you don't have to have celebrated sacraments. Like, they could be part of a food bank. They could go help out with the St. Vincent de Paul or your Knights of Columbus and things like that. They should be in and around the life of the parish beyond. They also need to learn like what the liturgical rites are actually about, including the mass and all of that stuff. So instead of, I heard a story one time that, the RCIA was meeting in the basement room and it was All Saints was happening upstairs. And one of the coordinators said, should we not take them upstairs so they could see what that's about? And the director was like, no, they need to be in this classroom. No, they should be in and around, because the whole idea of this is, how do we live as Catholics? What does it mean to infuse that into your faith? So again, it shouldn't be relegated. There should be sessions, right, about catechesis and particular concepts. And you want to make sure that you're covering all kind of questions so that this person is freely and willingly entering into the church. But again, something else that's said in here is teach to and from the rites. Go ahead and look at those and see, like, that's one of the ways too to notice readiness is when you look at the next threshold, look at what the questions are in and around that rite, and you present that to your catechumen or candidate and say, this is what's about to happen. Are you comfortable with these things? Are there things that we've missed? And you can delay that stuff and shift the times. But I think that's what it is. We as church really want there to be like this nailed down specific schedule. We want to put it on the calendar. We want to know what's happening when exactly. And this is not that. This is definitely, you have to take the person that comes in front of you or people that come in front of you and adjust yourself to what they need.
Wow, awesome, Christy. There's so much to this, and I love that it can be very individualized, and the idea of accompaniment and community support is part of this. I feel like so many times RCIA is separate, and they're separate from the community until Easter Vigil, and we're like, oh, I didn't know you were coming into the church. I don't know who these people are, but we should know who these people are, right? Because we are welcoming them into our community. So, Christy, we are coming up on time here, but I want to get to some of the resources that people can go to, because I am sure that for every question that you answered in there, there are 3 other questions. So where can people go to continue their learning on the RCIA process? I love that you call it process, not program. It is a process. It's not a program. So where can we go for this? So we already talked about the Rite of Christian Initiation of Adults.
That one is, so let me just say, that's huge, guys. There are intros to every section. Read them. It is beautiful, and it will help inform how you understand all of sacramental life and teaching. And then a couple, 3 that I'll give you just right off the top. And by the way, we're not promoted by anybody, but if any of these guys want to promote us, I'm not mad at that. I'm just kidding. The LTP Liturgical Training Publications has a site devoted to teaching around the RCIA. It's called catechumeneon.org. Oh, that's ACM, but yeah, there we are. Catechumeneon. See, I'm even doing the pronunciation for you guys. And they have, oh my gosh, guys, they have classes for the teachers, for people that are going to lead. They have, different kind of webinars and listening sessions and kind of support groups, and they're fabulous over there. They're wonderful folks, and they've got lots of great resources too for you that'll help you through the process, and every person involved, from the individuals seeking reception to your sponsors to your church community, and ways to engage. And I
just want to say that is like the coolest fire pit I've ever seen on this front page.
So pretty. Yeah.
So it's a nice little website there. Okay, what do we have next?
All right, go to Team RCIA at the top. So that's easy, teamrcia.com. Diana McAlintal and oh gosh, Mr. Wagner, I can't think of his first name right now. I'm so sorry. They run this primarily, and again, loads of resources. You can become a member here and you can get even further information and whatnot, but they do have lots of, they do webinars themselves. They teach across the country. They'll come out to you and help you get and see and it's really quick to learn how to get started and gets you kind of Nick Wagner. Thank you. Sorry, my brain this morning. It's early, you guys. But Team RCIA also has really good resources to help you understand kind of what your role is in teaching and leading and what you can do. So there, free newsletter down there at the bottom. All right, then let's, Sarah, go to the last one. It's the Association for Catechumenal Ministry. And these guys have some really great resources. Well, this RCIA participants book has a leader guide and a catechist guide that goes along. What you have there is outlines of catechetically what's happening for folks as they go through the RCIA process. Again, what you're going to see, I think, is that it's so easy to fall into this is a class. There are building blocks to the faith. We all know that. And that there are things that need to be taught and understood in order for a person to validly say, I'm coming into the church and I'm willing to do this and I understand what that means. And so don't get me wrong, there are sessions involved here that are teaching. I think ACM is wonderful at their layout. In their books, they give you literally like a session layout, but always in prayer, with prayer. And I feel like what ACM gives in their books is they'll give you an outline and they've got some prompting questions. And then they've got some places in the catechism where you can go for reference about some of the topics that they're presenting and questions, common questions that come up and or even questions to help prompt conversation for the group. So yeah.
I love the most recent blog is implementing a year-round catechumenate. Like, that was one of my questions. How does that work? So I'm just going to go here and read a little bit after we're done here. So some really great resources out there, some really great places to go if you have questions. Christy is my go-to guru, so feel free to reach out and I'm sure she can point you in the right direction.
Absolutely.
But be prepared. She's very passionate about this. So you get her started, it's a pretty long conversation you're going to have. So block off your time. I love that you know so much about it, Christy, and how we got to where we are with the process, and how new it really is for our priests. And thank you for clarifying that for me, because I have had conversations with some of our priests and associates, and they didn't know, and I was like, how could you not know? But now I understand, and I will put my judgmental attitude away because that's not fair. So that just opens up a whole new understanding of the rights, and why they do have to go to the book to figure it out, because it is still fairly new. So thank you for that information. We did go over a little bit, everybody. I do hope that this was very helpful for you. It was helpful for me. So, I guess that's important.
Well, and last thing I want to say
that you found some answers there. And Christy, go ahead.
Last thing, year-round means you don't tell somebody come back in September or whatever. You find a way to bring them into the church, even if it's not to classes that you have.
Awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And we have to just remember to make that terminology, part of what we do as ministry leaders. So I know that a lot of our RCIAs are run by volunteers. So I just want to say thank you out there. If you're a volunteer for RCIA, you are rock stars. We really appreciate it. And keep up the good work. Keep up, connecting with people. And everybody, let's continue to invite people into this process. invite people to learn about our faith, to that inquiry process. You know, I love this inquiry being part of that, the process, and something that can be done year round, and it can take 10 years. It can take however long it takes. So let's invite people into that inquiry. Let's make that part of who we are as missionary disciples and disciples of Christ. So thank you, everybody, for being here. We will come back at you next week with another topic of information, and we'll try to keep it a little closer to time. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your week. Bye.
Peace.